You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Daniel, we're back. Stephen Willis, Locked On Ole Miss. Daniel Monroe, Locked On Bulldogs. Listen, yes, I've said this multiple times this week, as you can imagine, but Lane Kiffin admitted that they practiced on the Georgia Bulldogs during the bye week 2 days. Just straight up. Yeah, before they practiced for Georgia on the bye week. Mm-hmm. So I view that coach speak like U.S. military technology. You only know about 20% of what's actually out there.
Sure.
So if he's talking about 2 days, they probably did it 5. And that explains a lot of what they put in. If you looked at the offense, we had Jake Crane from Crane & Company on my podcast early in the week, and he's like, this is the most vanilla offense that Lane Kiffin has ever put out there. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to flush it, move on. They're obviously looking for the Georgia Bulldogs because I think Lane knows that after what happened in Oxford a year ago, he is going to get Georgia's best. And I am thankful as an Ole Miss fan that this game is not at night. If this game was at night, that's probably worth 14 points in this ball game because of Kirby being really jacked up and all of that. I think in the daytime, better shot. Georgia is going to be good because they are still one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the Southeastern Conference and one of the best teams in America. So I am under no illusion that Ole Miss is just going to walk in and win that game at all. But Ole Miss is talented enough to where if they get just a couple of breaks, they don't have to play well, but they do need some help, a little bit of help. And if they get that help, which Georgia has been giving to teams in the first half of games, they've
tried.
Yeah. If Ole Miss gets that help, instead of a 10-0 game like you saw at Auburn, it could be 21-0 because the Ole Miss offense can do some of the stuff that Tennessee did with the deep passes, but they can also run the ball and do some of the stuff that Auburn was effective with in that game in the first half. Now, I am under no illusions. Again, this is Kirby Smart we're dealing with. It's going to get taken care of, and he's amped up for this game. But I think Dae'quan Wright and Cayden in the middle of the field are going to be important in this game. In pass coverage, Georgia's linebackers, when they're coming up and playing the run, they're the best in college football, but they can be taken advantage of whenever they're matched up one-on-one with a slot receiver like Cayden, just like Ole Miss did a year ago.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to try to do that, but with Trinidad Chambliss being 5'10", 5'11", you're going to see those tall trees raise their hands up to where the middle of the field might get taken away. But I think Dae'quan Wright and Cayden are the 2 players to watch in this football game.
Yeah, what you saw in the second half against Jackson Arnold, who we know is a carbon copy of Trinidad Chambliss,
exactly the same.
What you saw in the second half was a lot of spy, sometimes even double spy. Where you had multiple linebackers watching. We know Auburn had 15 total yards of offense in the second half. Late in the fourth quarter, they had negative 5 yards rushing in the second half. It worked really well. Obviously, 130 yards rushing in the first half for Auburn. They got those mistakes cleaned up. I do think you're going to see some spy from guys like C.J. Allen because obviously you gotta be wary. You can't just be wary of the underneath passing game. You get your eyes moving side to side in some of these formations and route combinations that Lane likes to run, and all of a sudden that's where the quarterback's going to hit you. Guys are going to have to stay in their rush lanes. Linebackers are going to have to be home. The safeties are probably going to have to come down and help with some of that underneath stuff so that the linebackers can be freed up to keep their eye on the quarterback. I'm curious on your end, and so I do agree. I think C.J. Allen, Raylan Wilson, Justin Williams, the true sophomore, Chris Cole, those guys are going to have a big role in the outcome of this game defensively. People look at the secondary and say the secondary's had issues this year. It's really the pass rush that's had issues this year. And it's hard to rush a guy like Chambliss anyway, because he's so elusive and he's so quick and they do so many design runs. And so you can't just pin your ears back and come after him. And so it's tough to get a pass rush anyway. The secondary has been okay. I think the linebackers are going to be really important in this game. I'm curious from your perspective, from an Ole Miss side, about that Ole Miss defensive front. Georgia's shown as a huge, a huge upgrade from last year's team, where Georgia finished 14th in the SEC in rushing, outside the top 100 nationally in rushing. I'm talking about the Georgia Bulldogs, finished outside the top 100 nationally in rushing last year. They've increased their rushing yards per game output by over 90 yards, Stephen, per game this year. The really emphasis on running football. Chauncey Bowens, Nate Frazier have been really good out of the backfield. We know Ole Miss lost a ton on that defensive front from last year.
All of them.
All of it. And so, but now it's not last year anymore. We're 6 games in. And so from your perspective, how's that group going to stack up against a banged up offensive line, but an offensive line that's been creating a lot of holes in the run game, 275 on the ground against Alabama in the last, in the last marquee home game that Georgia had. How's that Ole Miss defensive front going to hold up?
Well, the good news for Ole Miss fans is their 2 pups, no pun intended, are starting to grow up. With Kamarion Franklin and William Eccles, 2 5-star players that are true sophomores that are starting this year. Cam Franklin had a sack and a half against Washington State. He was one of the few players that actually played pretty well. William Eccles is back-to-back dominant sacks of getting pass rush and as well. And then Xavier Harris, he's 350 pounds. You know about Xavier Harris. He's been at Ole Miss, it feels like 10 years. So it depends on if Pete Golding, and I genuinely believe he's been playing odd fronts this year because he didn't have to worry about the running game, the physicality of it. LSU, they didn't stick with it. Tulane, even Washington State, you didn't have to worry about that. You could rush 3 and drop 8 and be very vanilla on the back end. You're not going to be able to do that against Georgia because Georgia and Mike Bola will absolutely run you out of an 8-man coverage. So I'm expecting some even fronts, maybe even some odd 5-man fronts for the Ole Miss Rebels, where they're going with 2 linemen, Prince Will Amonmi Ellen, I should say.
There it is. Yeah,
there
easy for you to say.
Yes. Lining up, playing a little bit of linebacker, stand-up defensive end, but they're trying to get Gunnar Stockton into 2nd and 8. They're trying to avoid the 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2, first down, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2, first down. Because if that happens, you're cooked. Yeah. So they need to figure out a way to stop the running game and force 2nd and 3rd down and long yardage. And if they can do that, then they can NASCAR package it a little bit. And they can get after Gunnar Stockton because they have played the cream of the cream of rushing quarterbacks in the SEC. That is something that they have seen this year. So I think they'll be able to handle Gunnar Stockton. He's a little bit different, but he's not Taylon Green as far as somebody that can just outrun you. I'm curious to see what it looks like. I'm more concerned, honestly, about the running backs. I'm not the linebackers and against the Georgia running backs. I think you're going to see some screens in this game. I think Bobo's going to get into his bag a little bit. I think Bell's going to be running some end arounds. They're going to mess with the eyes of the linebackers in order to get those short yardage games. And the linebackers that Ole Miss has, TJ Daugherty, Jaden Yates, Taj Chambers, those guys, this is going to be two of the three's biggest game that they've ever played in front of. And I guess Jaden Yates played at Ohio Stadium, so that probably counts a little bit towards that. But in this game, this is going to be huge. College game day, the whole 9 yards. There's a freak out factor with this defense. And if they can avoid the bust, because Ole Miss's problem in run defense, when you look at the stats, it's like, man, they're giving up 150 yards a game. That doesn't tell the whole story. For 95% of the game, they're giving up 2 and 3 yards per carry, but they give up 2 or 3 explosive plays a game that is skewing that. If they cannot give up explosives against the Georgia Bulldogs, they're going to be fine. And if you stop Georgia's running game, Ole Miss is going to win this game. But the problem is stopping Georgia's running game.
Yeah. If you score more points than the other team, you're going to win almost every time. Yeah. You just got to score more points than the other team. You just got to do it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. The last time Ole Miss won it in Athens was 1996. Now they don't play every year. But it's been a minute. Yeah. It's been a minute. And that game, by the way, the Ole Miss collective, Walker Jones, ran down Hines Ward in that game on a long pass. Yes. That game happened.
Some legends. Yeah, I mean, you're really coming off of, the more recent history, more interesting to me. You're coming off of a really big win for Lane and the program last year, in Oxford, to get that win against Kirby, to kind of validate proof of concept. Now, of course, they faltered down the stretch and, didn't end the season the way that they wanted to, but that it was a big win for Lane and company last year. And then you look back 2 years ago, the last time Lane Kiffin was in Athens, and it was a bloodbath.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was an absolute. Yeah. It was an absolute show, and so I'm not expecting really either type of performance. I mean, Ole Miss kind of dominated the game last year, and Georgia obviously dominated the game 2 years ago. I don't think this Georgia team, the next time they dominate somebody will be the first time they dominated somebody. So I'm not looking for it. At this point, you couldn't look for it. At this point, if you don't bet the Ole Miss first quarter line on FanDuel, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you haven't been watching a Georgia football game all year. Like, if you're not going to bet that line, I don't know what to. But then Georgia in the second half, 0 points to Alabama, 17 fewer points to Tennessee in the second half and overtime than they allowed in the first half. 0 points to Auburn in the second half, and 0 points other than a garbage time touchdown against the fourth stringers against Kentucky in the second half. The Georgia defense in the second half just figures it out. We know Kirby's the best in the game, but Lane's right there with him on the offensive side of the ball. One of the best in the game in terms of calling a game. It's what makes a matchup like this so fun, because it's not only the players going against each other, it's the offensive and defensive minds. So it's fun to watch.
Yeah, it should be a whole lot of fun. I've joked on my show this week that you almost need 2 game plans for this game. You need a first half game plan, and then when they adjust to that, you break out the second game plan.
Yeah.
That's probably the way that you attack this Georgia team, because they are so good at adjusting at halftime. They are really good. Anyway, when we come back, we're going to talk paths to victory and give our score predictions as well. Daniel Monroe of Locked On Bulldogs. I'm Stephen Willis of Locked On Ole Miss. Stick around. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the front door of Ole Miss. If you don't believe me, Google Ole Miss podcast and see how much we come up. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps the show, and it's absolutely free. Your support means the world to us. In another big moment on Locked On, college football fans, Locked On and Fire TV are presenting College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation a long time. 2-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. It's a college football preview show that only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. Howdy toddy, everybody. Remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.